This is about the importance of the experience of living in a spiritual community for awakening, with the example of the city of Auroville in India. Good morning, this is Wake Up with a short video or talk about living in a spiritual community and awakening, or Auroville and awakening. There are many people nowadays who are on the brink to wake up, but what they're missing is the experience of living in a spiritual community. And I mean spiritual, not religious. It doesn't mean that if you have the experience, you will wake up for sure. But if you have the experience, then the probability is much higher, then it's much easier to wake up. This is one of the reasons why a lot of former Osho disciples woke up after Osho's death. You can think about Osho what you want, but the fact is that there's probably no teacher, or there has been no teacher recently who helped so many people to wake up. Mostly indirectly and posthumously, but still. And one of the reasons is there were these two large communities, one in India and one in the US, and many small ones. And it doesn't even have to work, but you have to have the experience. That helps. And in India, in Southeast India, in Auroville near Pondicherry, near Chennai, there's a community since more than 40 years, founded by two enlightened beings, there are no enlightened beings, but two human beings to whom enlightenment has happened. There are about 3,000 people living in Auroville. Half of them are Indian and half of them are from the rest of the world, all over the world. Many German and French, but from more than 40 different countries. And for about 60 years, it works somehow. So it's also one of the oldest spiritual communities. As the founder has said, it works in spite of the inhabitants, because it was designed after higher principles, if there even is such a thing. But at least the founders understood the laws of Maya. No one knows exactly, but there are guesses and estimates that about one person in a million is awake and less are enlightened. But the more awake, the more awake. So it's a chain effect. So it's moving towards 1 in 100,000. Anyone could be awake, your neighbor, or like in the Dan Millman books, your local car mechanic in your gas station / garage around the corner. You never know, because at least 90% of all people who are awake will never talk about it to anyone. The estimated population of the United States of America, for example, is 330 million people. So there are probably at least 330 people who are awake in America, probably more. But probably less than 30 will talk about it or write about it, because most lose the interest in that. So most people who claim they're awakened or enlightened are probably not. But in Auroville, there are about 3,000 people living there. So the population is quite low. And of these 3,000, at least 3 are awake to my knowledge. Maybe more. As I said, you can never know. If someone is keeping it to him or herself, you will never know. But that is a ratio of 1 to 1,000 compared to 1 in a million. And while there's no guarantee, it goes to show that the probability is much higher. The setting there is very conducive to waking up. Many so-called spiritual communities are actually religious communities. They have very strong laws. If you look at Spiral Dynamics, for example, they're blue communities. What you need is a turquoise community. And Auroville happens to have that aspect as well. It's not that all the people who are living there have a higher consciousness or are more conscious or better somehow, but it's just the setting is perfect for the experience that most people need to wake up, or experiences, while in other places there will be more distraction. On the other hand, if it is your fate that awakening happens to you, it will happen anywhere, anyhow. The most common time to wake up is between 50 and 60. But if the setting is very easy, it might happen also earlier, for example, between 30 and 40. That said, I want to reiterate that awakening is not something that is better than anything else. It's just different. So it's not something you have to aim towards, that is worth wanting to achieve. It's not an achievement, it's not something that you are doing, it's something that is happening to you. Or maybe not even to you, it's something that is happening. But if you're seriously interested in losing your illusions, all of them, not only the ones you choose to, then living in a spiritual community is probably a helpful experience. How can you see if a community is a religious or a spiritual one? A religious community has a lot of laws, especially moral laws. A spiritual community has as few laws as possible, and ideally none. Ideally there are only guidelines, because it is a place of taking responsibility for yourself. There's no one who tells you anymore what to do and what not to do. You are responsible for everything yourself in that community. In truth, of course, there is no self, but that is easier to realize if you get out of this domination most people live in. Most people love it if they are told what to do, because then if anything goes wrong, they can always shift the blame on someone else. In a true spiritual community, you have as much freedom as is possible as a sleeper, which is a great training for waking up, because once awakening has happened to you, this is the situation you will find yourself in. You're all alone and you cannot blame anyone for your problems. The same is actually how to recognize a true awakened or enlightened teacher. It's very difficult to see that, but one way to see that is, does he or she tell you what to do, or does he or she allow you 100% freedom in your choices and actions? Alright, that is it about spiritual communities and Auroville and awakening. Thank you for watching and listening. Thank you for subscribing, and see you soon with another uncommon video.